Well, I'm glad you're here watching my video on YouTube. The fact is, I don't know how long this will be up, since YouTube has decided to start censoring me and pulling down my videos. But don't worry, you can watch this video on rumble.com/RandPaul, where I post all of my content. Love to see you over at rumble.com.
But joining us now, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. Thank you for being here, Senator. So, Senator, I wanted to start with Biden's speech at the UN, but we watched it and we almost fell asleep, to be honest with you, Senator. So let's talk about something that I think is on a lot of Americans' minds, and it's this whole idea of COVID, the boosters, and what's not happening, what should be happening. What do you say, sir? Where do we stand with the FDA, the boosters, and everything they're trying to shove into our arms from D.C.?
I think a couple things are pretty clear with the vaccine. One, I do believe that the vaccine does lower your chance of being hospitalized, even if it's not perfect. You can still get infected, and people are having more and more breakthrough infections. But the vaccine is of benefit. Now, the booster vaccine is a booster of the original vaccine. It's just another dose of the original vaccine. Ideally, what we would be doing is speeding up the approval of a Delta variant vaccine. They have it. It's in testing. And I frankly think for people to take it voluntarily, that we should offer it sooner rather than later. It would be much more effective than a booster that's against the old variant that is now being escaped by the vaccine. So I think we also need to acknowledge, though, in looking at this, that those of us who have had the disease, about 100 million Americans, that all of the studies are showing that if you've had the disease, you have at least as good immunity as the vaccine, if not better.
Senator, I had COVID, I have antibodies, and yet I got this Moderna vaccine. I'll be honest with you, I did it because I wanted to, not because I had to by the government, certainly not because Newsmax wanted me to or had to, or even asks me if I did. But the point is, I got sicker from the vaccine than I did when I actually had COVID. I didn't even know I had COVID, but I had the antibodies. So I got sicker from the vaccine.
Well, this is something that should be studied. And because they're so Pollyanna, oh, don't question the vaccine, they won't even study the question of whether or not people have already had COVID, whether they have a higher risk of side effects from the vaccine. They also haven't studied the optimal time. Even the CDC, though, admits that you shouldn't get vaccinated within 3 months of being infected. But if you go to Walgreens or CVS and you want to get a vaccine, you fill out a survey, but nobody questions you when you had COVID. And if you had COVID 2 weeks ago, they don't say, oh, you should wait on the vaccine. So there are real problems that could occur. In fact, the myocarditis that's happening in young males is in all likelihood more common in young males who have already had COVID. But because kids get very few symptoms, a lot of times they don't even know they've had COVID. So, no, I think we should be more honest with people, do more studies on what the side effects are. And I think the thing is, the conclusion is pretty easy for people over 65. Without question, the disease is way worse than any possible complications. But for kids under 25, the question isn't exactly as clear because the disease is so inconsequential in the vast majority of kids. The vaccine has to be almost perfect or almost perfectly without side effects to be worthwhile for them. And we ought to honestly look at that and not just beat people to death or browbeat people to death and force them to take vaccines or they can't enjoy sports or school. I think that's a terrible injustice to our kids.
Indeed, indeed. Senator, before we lose you, I have a couple more minutes. I want to play the soundbite for you. This happened. It just kind of blew us away. Senator Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, leader of your body, has decided that this whole thing at the border is Trump's fault. Take a listen to the soundbite.
I urge President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas to immediately put a stop to these expulsions and to end this Title 42 policy at our southern border. That we cannot continue these hateful and xenophobic Trump policies that disregard our refugee laws.
So I guess what he's saying is let anyone come, just let them come on in, open the door. Your thoughts?
That's insanity. Having an open border, there's polling that shows that over 700 million people would come tomorrow. The chaos of an open border, we're seeing a little bit of that now, or a lot of that. With you look at the 10,000 Haitians underneath a bridge wanting to come in. So no, the idea that that's somehow xenophobic or racist, I'm all for legal immigration. In fact, I would increase legal immigration, but I would have zero illegal immigration. They all ought to go back, send them all back. Don't let one of them in illegally. Apply to come to our country in a normal fashion. We'll welcome you, but illegally, we should have zero tolerance.
Senator, any doubt in your mind that the plan for Democrats, Schumer, leader of the Senate, and others, Pelosi, et cetera, wants these people to be able to come in because, and they tried to sneak this in. They tried to sneak this in the $3.5 trillion funding budget to get some sort of path to citizenship and therefore a path to Democrat votes. It feels to me like they're looking for millions of free Democrat votes.
Yeah, I think Chuck Schumer, when he talks about completely open borders, is looking over his shoulder and seeing AOC right behind him, more radical than he can possibly imagine. So he has to meet her on her own ground. She said also that no one should be deported. But that is a crazy notion. It will lead to more people coming. Already, tens of thousands of people are coming because they perceive the Biden administration as being weak on the border. Senator Johnson asked the question today, 1.3 million people have been apprehended. Where are they? How many of them were dispersed within the country? And see, the worry is that maybe over half of these people have just simply been sent places in our country and said, hey, please come back and appear in court a couple of months from now, and none of them ever will. So really, we need to know what happened to the 1.3 million that were apprehended. Have they been sent home? How many were sent home? How many were dispersed into our country? Mayorkas wouldn't answer the question today, said he didn't know. He's in charge and he doesn't know. That's a problem.
Yeah, Senator, I think I saw an interview with I believe it was Mayorkas or someone else, another Democrat, and they said, yeah, 300 people sent 300 people for 15,000 at the border. They sent a plane or two loads of people back to Haiti. What are we doing with the other tens of thousands, et cetera? Senator Rand Paul, always good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, joining us